Hello there, IELTS students. Welcome to IELTS Podcast. You no longer have to worry, fret or panic about IELTS because we are here to guide you through this test jungle. Enjoy these IELTS tutorials, and if you need more help or want to access the famous online course, you can visit us at IELTSPodcast.com.
Hi IELTS students, this is Daphne here, IELTS Podcast. Thanks for tuning into this latest podcast. In this podcast today, we are going to be talking about how to learn English for your IELTS exam. There are many different methods out there of learning English. You've probably experienced some. I've definitely experienced a lot of different methods when I've been learning different languages. Some more successful than others, I have to say. You've probably had the same experience. You may be studying from home. You may be going to a language school. You may be just learning, helping yourself by listening to podcasts like this one, and we hope we're helping you here. So there's lots of different ways you can learn. What we're going to do today is go through some of the different methods and some of those benefits and some of the disadvantages of them. We are then going to go a little bit into a bit of background and theory and the order of the way language is learned. This might be really helpful for you if you can't work out why you're progressing, if you feel you're stuck on a certain level in your learning, in your study, and you're thinking, why aren't I getting any better? This might help you to understand what's happening in your brain, the cognitive process you're going through when you're actually learning. We're going to look at different ways of learning English online. A lot of you may be operating solely online and not going to classes in person. So we can suggest some different ways to help you improve your IELTS practice and to learn online. We're going to look at the quickest and the best way to improve your IELTS writing. Now, we know from our experience here that feedback is the best way to improve. This is what works for our students. Great success rates with our students when they go and take the exam. Ben's course of Jump to Band 7, or it's free. If you've already got a 6.5, send us a sample essay. We can give you some feedback. We can see how you can improve, and our course can really help you there. As a bonus, halfway through this, we're going to have a little diversion and look at some speaking tips, how you can become more fluent in your IELTS speaking. Okay, so as you know, when you learn a language, people may have said to you before, the mother of all learning is repetition. And there you go, I'm going to repeat that for you. The mother of all learning is repetition. So time and time again, researchers have shown that this is true for language learning as well as learning any other subject that you might have studied at school or at university or for your jobs. So information goes into our brain, and unless we repeat it, unless we fix it there, it disappears very quickly. As I said at the beginning, there's many different thoughts and opinions across the globe about the best way to learn a language. If you've studied in different countries, maybe you've been on a study exchange, or maybe you've been lucky enough to learn in another country, the methods may have been quite different from what you've learned at home. So in some countries, Spain, and I think in China this is very popular as well, the audiolingual method is very popular. This involves essentially the repetition of phrases. So you're not really even getting involved in the grammar, you're not really having to understand the grammar or technically how the language is working, but you're doing a lot of repetition, maybe in a language lab, which means the instructor is presenting the correct model of a sentence, and the students then have to repeat it. And the teacher can then present new words, and then the student will repeat the same structure but with a new word. So there's no grammar, but things are just memorized in form, so in sentences. The problem here is that it's difficult to then be spontaneous. It's difficult to then take that language that you've learned into another context. And as you know, in your IELTS work, the writing and the speaking, you need to be flexible. So flexibility is a really key thing. This is difficult if you're learning in that kind of method. It's harder for you to move the language that you've learned into the new context, into the sentences that you want to be producing in your writing or in your speaking. Another popular method, and this has become really more popular and works very well online, is flashcards. This is great for vocab, and I would really recommend this. Website like Quizlet, you can either make your own flashcards or you can find lots of flashcards on there. If you want to learn vocabulary for one of the popular IELTS topics, maybe education, maybe the environment, maybe to do with science or marketing or advertising, get into Quizlet, and then that is a very good method. Repetition, testing yourself, having the same vocab presented to you in different ways, really getting your brain working. And then, of course, you have to use that vocab you've learned. In some classes, maybe you've been to English classes where the whole thing is taught in English, especially if you have studied in England or America or Australia, that everything is in English from the very beginning. This is a great way to learn. You don't have the chance to translate. You're having to work in English, which is very important. When I learned French and German at school a while back, the method we learned was the grammar translation method. This is, goodness me, based on the way people used to learn Latin. I also learned Latin at school, which was fantastic grounding for grammar and really understanding how languages work. So when we learned Latin and French and German, we translated everything from one language to another language. It really, really helps you understand how the grammar works. It gives you an excellent foundation. It's not much fun. There's no communication. It was all quite technical. It is one way to learn, but I think nowadays the communication method, where people are speaking much more to each other, is much more relevant, isn't it? Especially more relevant for how you're going to use your IELTS exam once you've got that success. So experiment with lots of different methods. It's always a really useful way to see what works best for you, and you'll probably change as you go along. So a bit of background. I mentioned a bit of background and a bit of theory, and this may well help you understand what happens when you are acquiring a second language. So one of the great people behind this is Stephen Krashen, and he has a theory on this. And the theory says that there are 5 different stages in the development of the acquisition of language. So he suggests that this is a natural order and it can't change. And that whatever teachers do, this won't make any difference because this is how your brain is working. Quite interesting, this, I think. So pre-production is what's called the silent period. And that may last between 6 and 12 months. Imagine back to the very, very beginning when you started learning English at school, when you were very young maybe, or even recently if you started as quite an older learner, not old, but older, mature learner. Maybe you've just been listening for a long time and not having the confidence to say much. So at this stage, learners have a vocabulary of around 500 words. They're very cautious to speak. Some may start to copy the person they're learning from, but they will be very unlikely to use any creative language. So you'll be operating in your comfort zone, we could say. Having gone through that stage, you're going to enter into the early production stage. And here you have a vocabulary using short phrases and individual words, and your vocab may be 1,000 words. You can remember large sections of language, but you may make some pretty big mistakes. And this stage, he reckons, lasts for another 6 months. You see why it takes so long. We're already on about 18 months, and we've only got 1,000 words. This obviously isn't the case for everybody, but this is technically what happens in a lot of people. So after that stage, you're going to be more confident. You're going to start getting into the speech emergence phase. Here you're going to have a vocab of around 300 words. You can ask questions. You can use simple phrases. You're probably going to make quite a lot of grammatical mistakes, but at least you can make yourself understood. That's going to give you confidence. You can go out somewhere. You can ask for information. Obviously, at this stage, you're not going to be thinking about IELTS. You've probably been through this stage. It's just interesting to think back on what was happening when you were in that stage. IELTS is way above this. We're then going to get to the intermediate fluency stage. This is interesting. There are a lot of people who get stuck in the intermediate phase. Intermediate stage, when you're learning a language, is the biggest and is often now subdivided into different stages. This is like a plateau. Super frustrating. You're thinking, why aren't I making progress? Why aren't I getting any better? I'm trying so hard on my English. But what's happening is that your brain is still working, I promise you. Your vocab is probably 6,000 words. You can use more complex sentences. You can use more phrases. You're getting more creative. You've reached a stage where you can articulate your thoughts. You can share your opinions. You may make quite a lot of mistakes with complicated structures. Connecting this to IELTS, what band would this be? You're probably looking at a 5.5 in writing. You're probably looking at a maybe 6 in speaking, something like that. But I know you're all after a higher score than that. So we need to get into the next phase. This next phase, advanced fluency it's called. So at this level of fluency, the learner can speak the language almost as well as the native language speaker. It will have taken possibly between 5 and 10 years to reach this level of fluency, depending on exposure to the language. Now, Krashen believes there's no difference in the way we learn the first language or any subsequent languages, and I think that's very interesting. So essentially, those 5 phases that he's talking about would be the same when you're a child learning your first language as to whether you're learning a second language or a third or a fourth. So his theories on the acquisition of a second language are sometimes called the monitor model or the input hypothesis. If this is interesting to you, this kind of thing, then check him out, Stephen Krashen, very interesting website, and there's a lot of graphs and graphics on that, which just go into it in a bit more detail. So here you are, IELTS students, on your advanced fluency level. And what can you do? How can you use this fluency you've got to get your IELTS really working? How can you improve? How can you be the best? So you can do a lot of stuff online. Now, we know there's been an explosion of apps, of information, of blogs, of all sorts of stuff on YouTube to help you. So it's up to you to find what works best for you without confusing yourself completely and without getting different information from 100 different tutors. I'm cautious always on the stuff I see online. I really, really want to check out how good it is. I want to check out how qualified these people are. I want to see what their background is. And that's really, really important for me. And I'm sure it's really important for you as well. There's a lot of apps you can use. We've all used Duolingo or LinguaLearn or FluentU. There's a lot of good apps out there. Make sure you choose software that works for you. I think it's okay for vocabulary. The danger for me is that you're not really putting it in context and you're not really putting it in an IELTS context. But if you know that vocabulary is an issue for you, and if you're getting feedback from us and we're saying, you need to work on your academic vocabulary, this is really important, then check that kind of thing out. So an app that can reinforce some academic words for you, maybe in a topic to do with, as we said, maybe education or the environment or media or something where you feel you have a gap in your vocab, then it's a really, really good way to improve your the range of your vocab and improve that lexical field. The danger is that you may have a lot of words, but you can't communicate it. So you have to put this into context, obviously. Put it into context by practicing. Practice your speaking by speaking to your colleagues at work. Practice your writing. Send us an essay. We can give you feedback. So you may be working at home. What can you do online when you're at home? Obviously, there's a lot of resources out there that we already said on the internet. But ensure that in your home, things are English. So you can fix your computer so your computer is in English. The instructions are English rather than in your language. It's a really good trick, but it will make you think and it'll give you some vocabulary as well. Get as much contact as you can with native speakers where you live or with other people who are studying for IELTS. Set up a little group, work together, practice together, give each other feedback, have a little session working on vocabulary. When you're watching films or listening to podcasts in English, make sure that you really actively listen. This is so important. Make sure that you are really working while you're listening, not just sitting watching TV thinking, it's in English, that's fine. In my experience, the best thing to do is to be aware So watch something or listen to something and say, okay, I'm not very good at articles, for example. I get in a muddle with the or a. So I'm going to listen to this podcast and I'm going to see how that speaker uses the and a, and maybe I can help myself. Or you're listening to a podcast with difficult vocabulary, so take a pen, actively listen, write down some vocab. There's a lot of stuff that you can do. We recommend a lot of these tips when you sign up to the newsletter, IELTSPodcast.com. That has all the special offers that we have. That links you back to our website. So much help on the website. So many best tips on how to learn IELTS. So, internet assistance. There's a lot of content out there. There's a lot of games that can help you learn the language. Subscribe to the newsletter or our newsletter. Subscribe to a newspaper or a magazine. Read as much as you can. This is very important. There's some students, maybe you're the same. You panic about the writing, you focus on the writing, and then you think, oh help, I've been practicing my reading, I need to practice my reading. So for me, practice everything together. Don't just isolate one bit and forget the rest. Everything in English works together. All these 4 skills that you're going to be tested on connect to each other. So if you improve your academic reading, then that will filter through to your writing. You'll get a much better experience of the coherence. Read a newspaper in English, you see how those paragraphs are constructed, and that is what we're trying to help you do on our writing course and on the Jump to Band 7 course, and we're helping you with the coherence. This is super important and does take a lot of skill. So I said earlier, here we go, that we were going to give you some 7 tips for your IELTS speaking preparation. So I've talked a bit about writing. You know I'm a huge fan of IELTS writing. I really enjoy correcting your essays. Thank you all for sending them in to me. Thank you for getting involved with us. We really appreciate it. Well, let's look at speaking quickly. While fluency and accuracy are both essential to the understanding of spoken and written language, they're 2 separate issues. So fluency is how well you're speaking, you're keeping going, you're not stopping. Accuracy is something else. And when you look at your speaking exam, how it's graded, the fluency is how you keep going, you're not stopping. But the accuracy is also graded, the grammar accuracy and the vocabulary accuracy. So you have to find that balance, and that does take quite a lot of skill. So the accuracy is the grammar, is the pronunciation, is the vocab. Fluency is how well you can convey your ideas without hesitating. So if you're practicing fluency, maybe don't worry so much about accuracy, but then if you're practicing accuracy, don't worry so much if it takes you a bit more time. It's okay to balance these things. So let's look at these top tips. Find a role model. Find someone who you can listen to on a subject which you find interesting. Now, I'm a huge fan of David Attenborough. I don't know if you've ever watched these amazing programs, Planet Earth or Blue Planet, which you hopefully can get on iPlayer or on the YouTube. So David Attenborough is an amazing, I would say, environmentalist, presenter, broadcaster. But he's got a very lovely English accent. So listen to what he says. Think about his use of language, his use of the words. Very skillful. Copy some of those phrases. So copy phrases and sentences. It doesn't matter if you don't understand all the words, but the aim of this is to improve your fluency. You're not worrying too much about the grammar, the vocabulary, but you are listening to the music in the language. You're listening to the stress, the rhythm, the melody of it. And English is very important at this. This is a stress language. So we stress certain syllables, like you can hear me doing, stress timed, not syllable timed. So it is different. Don't worry about if you make some mistakes. Doesn't matter. You're practicing. That's fine. Get your brain in gear. Some people find it hard to get their speaking brain going. And the best way to do this is to start slowly. So paraphrase what someone said. If someone asks you a question, you can paraphrase that question back to them just to practice how the words sound. You're practicing paraphrasing, that's fine, but you're also buying yourself time. So only really the best English speakers will have a full sentence ready to reply. And normally as you're speaking, you're still working out quickly what you're going to say next. We all know that we do this in our native language. Doing it in a foreign language is difficult. It takes time, but it's really good practice. So tip number 5, never learn words on their own. And we emphasize this in every podcast we do, talking about language learning and vocab learning. Learn phrases and sentences. Learn words in context. Learn a lexical field. If you're focusing on crime, for example, as your topic, get together as many words on crime as you can. Record them all together in your notebook. Pen and paper, promise you, still the best. Record them in your notebook, then use them. Use them in sentences. Use them in an essay. Send us an essay. We'd love to give you some feedback. Great way to improve. Talk to your colleagues at work. Ask them a question. Use these words. Make sure you write them down in a full sentence and use them. Prepare ahead. If you're feeling anxious, if you have to work in English, or if you have a business meeting in English or something, you're not feeling very confident, think in advance what you're going to say. So what might my colleague say to me? What might this client say to me? And have some little phrases in your head. Get ready. Be prepared. Connected to that final tip, and this is hard, but it is really worth trying to do. Think in English. We all have conversations with ourselves the whole time. Try and get that conversation going in English. So ask yourself a question in English and see how you would answer. So all this goes back to what we were talking about at the beginning with Stephen Krashen, what's happening cognitively in your brain. And all the time relate this to IELTS. Keep thinking about those exam skills. Keep your antennae open. Look and watch and learn and think, and that's the best way to improve really, really quickly. So let's get back to writing. A lot of you struggle with writing. That's why you're listening to this. That's why you sign up to the course and how we can get us to help you. So how can you learn writing skills in English quickly? The best thing to do is set goals. Make a plan. Repeat the words and phrases a lot. Ask questions and get feedback. So English is the most spoken language in the world, so you won't find it difficult to find resources. We've already said there's a lot out there on the internet, in magazines, in books, with real colleagues, real people. Make sure that you find stuff to do that's challenging, but don't get discouraged. So set goals, but make your goals relevant to your IELTS writing. If your goal is to improve your vocabulary, for example, if you've been told in a feedback from us that your grammar's a bit weak, then make goals to improve your grammar. Work out what you need for IELTS grammar. And then try and work on that. Make sure you're very confident on your use of tenses. Make sure you're confident on your passive verbs. Make sure you can use relative clauses. There's a lot of skills that you need. So make relevant goals. Register for an exam. Set yourself a target. And then start your studies. So setting a goal makes it easier to prepare. Then get into a study routine and stick to it. If you want to learn English so you can discuss your favourite hobbies, for example, if you feel you need a bit more practice on your confidence on your speaking, then find English speakers to help you. Find a podcast on that topic. The goal will be the basis of your plan and your roadmap to how that's going to happen. Then get a bit of detail into this plan. Set your intentions. How long do you have? Are you going to say, okay, I'll do IELTS next year? Or are you going to say, I'll do IELTS on the 3rd of November? Give yourself a really good target. The answer's going to be different, but that will make a difference as to how much study you need to do. Set realistic goals. There's no point setting a study for doing 3 hours a day when you know that's impossible because you're working really hard at the moment. Start off slowly, but keep it regular. Stick to it. Look at your schedule again after a couple of weeks. Is this working for you? Can you write 3 essays a week and send them in to us? Or is this a bit too much for you? It's got to work for you. You've got to have time with us to listen to the feedback, to hear what we're saying, to think about what we're saying, this processing in your brain, and then to send us another essay after that, help you improve. So remember when we went back to the beginning, repetition is key. Repetition is the most important thing. It's building these new paths in your brain. And then the more you repeat something, the more the information goes in. Do you learn something? You wait a while, you try it again, you wait a while, you try it again. There's lots of methods, there's lots of ways you can do this. There's a gold list. If you want to check out how to learn vocabulary, check out the gold list. Really good way to learn vocabulary. All about reinforcing. Equally, these apps like Quizlet that we talked about do the same kind of thing. So ask questions. Active learning, really important. Really good when you're listening, when you're reading, when you're doing your writing, when you want to practice your speaking. All connected to this IELTS exam still. Ask questions. Ask questions to your colleagues. Why do you say that in English? Why do you use that tense there? Try and get them to explain to you so you really understand. Ask your colleagues. Ask other IELTS students. You're studying together. There is no such thing in my book as a stupid question. I will keep on asking questions until I absolutely understand something. When I understand it, that's okay. I've got it. But I have to keep on asking questions until I get to that stage. That's fine. So find your curiosity. Get answers to these questions. If you're on a course, then ask your teacher. If the teacher doesn't know the answer, they'll find out. That's what they're there for. Maybe you'll find out together. You can explore together. And then you really will remember it. That helps you. If you're studying alone, you can still find answers to your questions on blogs, on websites, and on forums. Word of warning though, watch out for just watching TV in English and thinking you're learning. Watching TV is a passive experience. It's not going to be the best way to learn English. Make your language learning active. Listen to podcasts. You've got to work harder. You've got no images. Great practice as well, obviously, for your IELTS listening. So in conclusion, what we've talked about today, how you can best learn English for IELTS. You've got to find a method that works for you. You've got to set your goals. Next thing, you've got to plan your routines and your work environment. You've got to commit to finishing within the time frame that you set yourself. That's no good saying, I'm going to do my exam on the 3rd of November, and the 3rd of November comes up and you haven't done any work. So that goal has to really be important. Get some feedback. We've talked a lot about this. What we do is feedback, and that's the best way to improve. Send us your essay. We can help you. Really important on this. It's a really good way to find out where you're making mistakes, how you can get better super quickly. Repetition and practice. Repetition keeps recycling that vocabulary. Learn some vocab, put it in your essay. Learn some vocab, use it to speak. Start now. There is absolutely nothing to stop you from starting now. So start studying for IELTS, sign up to the newsletter, practice the skills you need, master the language, and then you will be really, really confident by the time you get around to taking your exam. So I'm Daphne, thank you for listening today. Really hope this has helped you and inspired you, and look forward to reading your essays soon.
Thanks for listening to IELTSPodcast.com.